When you create your own custom 5-rotor engine, there isn't a parts catalog to order from. You basically have to invent everything from scratch. Today we're going to be creating a brand new intake manifold for my turbo 5-rotor. The goal is going to be to distribute boost evenly to all 5 rotor housings without creating massive turbulence. And we're going to be using the latest and greatest 3D printed metal technology. First, I want to show you guys what a peripheral port is. So come on in here and let's take a look.
So what you'll notice as we slide down in here into the engine bay is that these holes are drilled directly into the side of the rotor housing. These are the peripheral ports. They allow a path flow of air straight into the rotor face itself. Let me show you what it looks like with a flashlight.
So I'm going to slide you right down the side and show you straight inside the port. You can see that's the apex seal and the rotor itself crossing the peripheral port flange. This allows us to get the most amount of air possible into the engine for maximum horsepower per PSI. Now, one of the biggest struggles we had with this original intake manifold design was the fact that we were using available mandrel pieces that were on the market and intercooler cores. And trying to package that all together with hand fabrication is really difficult with the constraints of this engine bay. When you do a custom peripheral port engine, you're pretty much on your own as to how you want to design it. I used Stephen Cockerell from Billet Rotary store in Australia, and they designed these custom 2-bolt flanges, top and bottom. The reason why we're using a 2-bolt flange to attach the intake manifold top and bottom is because it provides structural rigidity and there's no movement. So there's an O-ring on the face of the engine which seals to this flange, and you don't have to worry about vibration or movement. Whereas on my previous engine, the 4-rotor, which was also a peripheral port, we had this Vangean style clamp like you see at the top of this intake manifold. We had the same thing at the bottom. Now that can work, and it's nice because you get flexibility and you don't have to worry about access to the hardware as it's just a clamp. But the downside is that flexibility offers a potential for a fire risk because you have fuel that's being sprayed into the runner. And so if it's not solidly mounted at the bottom, you could potentially have movement that would wear out the O-ring and fuel could leak past the seal. And I did have a problem on the dyno once where that occurred, where I had nitrile O-rings in the Vangean clamp instead of FKM, and it wasn't compatible with the ethanol. It eroded the O-ring, and then fuel leaked past it onto the exhaust manifold and caused a flash fire. So this is something we want to keep in mind, and the idea on this design is to replicate what we have here but be able to get a tighter radius and still be able to have access to the hardware to pull the intake manifold on and off.
Before we get into the new intake manifold, I want to make one thing very clear. This isn't a criticism of the previous design or the fabricator who built it. We were working with the parts and information we had at the time, and when you're building something that's never been done before, like a 5-rotor, you have to make the best decisions you can. The original intake did exactly what it was designed to do and got us to this point. This redesign is simply about using new technology and to keep optimizing and see if we can find a little more efficiency. Because these coil packs have to sit on top of the engine block, it means that the intake plenum, or the box that's on top of the engine, has to sit relatively tall. Therefore, the intake runners have to be pretty long in order to reach the plenum box itself.
The first thing we want to work on is being able to get this on and off much easier so that we can have a stud on the top and the bottom. Right here, I'm having to use a bolt on the top of the flange and a stud on the bottom because there's no way for me to slide this manifold on and off if it was on studs top and bottom because we run into this collector of the exhaust. So with 3D printed technology, we can reshape the elbow and get a tighter radius while also maintaining clearance from the collector. So let me introduce you guys to Justin and Carl.
Ultimately, at the end of the day, like anytime you're making a sharp 90-degree bend like that is not ideal. It can be done. Ideally, you would have an area for the air to have an expansion chamber here to slow it down to make the bend. But ultimately, line of sight is just your best option to get better air distribution.
So you're saying looking into the throttle, you want to be able to see every runner?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like a rule of thumb.
Absolutely. Whenever possible. Obviously, there's ways to do it like this. It's just not ideal. And on that car with plenty of space, like getting the throttle over here where it can just visually, you know, get a straight shot to all of those ports, like, will vastly improve the air distribution. We can still put some taper in this to keep the velocity up by the time it gets to the back here. And it should just be way better. I mean, I know they tried to like basically account for this sharp angle or attempt to make it better with some divider plates inside, which is like a good idea in theory. But at the end of the day, like, you know, with some of the differences you're seeing in the actual airflow going to each of the runners, like, it's probably more of an issue than
I think the biggest, like, I think it's a great fabricated piece. The problem was that I was working with these cores that were given to me, and they're so long. Then because the cores are so long, then the runners have to be this long, and so does the end tank, and then we're kind of constrained to this position because we can't get over there at 45 degrees. So you're thinking that basically we're going to shorten, what's the basic design would be, you're going to shorten the core area, bring the runners in closer together, and then that gives you, and then shift this whole thing over, because with the 3D printed geometry, you can take this end tank and round it towards the runners. Right. Then that moves everything over to give you room to do the 45.
Right. Getting as much space as possible. This is 24 inches long. There's some off-the-shelf cores that are around 20 inches long, but we're going to go up.
Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you today's video sponsor, FlexiSpot. I've set up this new space in my office where I can review products, but I need something durable to place them on so I can review them standing or seated and also be able to work from my laptop.
Let me show you guys my new FlexiSpot E7 Pro. One thing I didn't want was a desk that starts wobbling the second you put something heavy on it. This one's rated to support up to 440 pounds, so throwing engine parts on it isn't a problem at all. The dual motor system is smooth and quiet, and I can switch between sitting and standing in just a few seconds. So whether I'm editing videos, answering emails, or going over parts for this 5-rotor, it's nice to be able to change positions throughout the day. It has programmable height presets, so one button takes it right where I want it. And I know someone's going to ask how sturdy it is, so I figured I'd give it a test myself. Yeah, standing and jumping on your desk probably isn't recommended, but it handled it without any issue. Assembly was also straightforward, everything was clearly labeled, and I had it together pretty quickly. Overall, it's a solid desk, it's stable, and this fits in the new workspace perfectly.
So if you'd like your own E7 Pro, or if you're on a budget, they also offer the standard E7. Check out the link that I'm going to leave in my description and use discount code YTE730 for $30 off on your purchase. Thank you guys for watching, and let's get back to the 5-rotor. I can kind of illustrate the point here. So here's the throttle, and it's a 90-degree angle. To get line of sight, we need to move it out 45 degrees. But if you move it 45 degrees, there's no room for the charge pipe. So even if we were able to maintain line of sight with this manifold design, we would not have room for the charge pipe. And then on top of that, you have the body of the car, which the rear glass slopes down in front of the turbocharger, and you would end up hitting the rear bodywork right in this area. So the only solution is we need to take this actual throttle and we need to move it back this way and clock it 45 degrees.
You know, we don't want to cut any more intercooling capacity out of this. This is already probably
up for more
vertical. Yeah, like ultimately this is undersized in my opinion for the application. Like we'll squish it in this way. We'll go a lot higher with it. It might be a touch wider this way. And then your runners, you know, which we measured, they were not about 18 inches or something, which we've actually done quite a bit. You've confirmed with a lot of people. You've been basically bugging everybody for the past week on how long their freaking runners are.
Yeah, we got a flow chart.
So it's like Charlie, like we was like got it all plotted out. Like, this dude hasn't been sleeping and just like thinking about runner lengths. But my 13B, like, you know, I have 2 different length runners. They average around 13.5 inches or so. And it makes power to 9,200 before the torque starts laying over. So with the torque drop that you're seeing on this, how soon you're seeing it, we're going to take some length out of the runners. So getting this like base plate a little bit closer, lean it down, just follow, because you know we can also get more of a sharp bend out of it, and get better angling for all of that. So bring that closer, get 3 or 4 inches out of the runner length, and it should just package a lot better too. Yeah, squish it on.
I can't wait to see what you're about to come up with.
Dude, it's gonna be good. We'll do some scanning and let's see what we can do.
All right.
doing there, Wildcat?
You know, just scanning the coolest car in the game.
Yeah? What's so cool about it?
You know, 120 millimeter turbo,
Yeah? Yeah, tell me more.
5 rotor,
5 rotor.
5 rotors.
5 rotor. That's one more than 4.
I only see 2 of those things.
I mean, any more,
5.
any more, I might need another.
Oh boy. Calibration. So, yeah, no wires. We'll call this out.
You just have to.
What do you mean? It's perfect.
That meme of that meme guy that has the smashed in head.
I'm sure that makes it even worse. Ooh, wow. Ooh, that's nice. Ooh.
Well, I think it was like,
Ooh,
is that
you guys are gonna have to leave me alone for a sec.
Yeah, it's magnetic. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
That's crisp. I
got
like that. Is it?
they have magnets on it, so it's not-
Crispy honey chicken, dude.
Oh, so it breaks the magnet. Oh, is this up and this is down?
Yep.
See, I already knew.
It's so weird. It's like the moment you pull that, it's just it's more like a gunshot trigger. You're just firing a cannon.
That is so cool.
It's a great way of trying to practice magnetic field and then
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, I'll fit.
How do you fit in your FB?
Great.
Really?
Tillets. Thank you, Tillets.
Oh yeah. Those are tight.
When Carl sits in it, he looks like a child. He's like,
I can't see where the steering wheel. I don't like driving the car. It's not because I can't drive it.
Welcome back, guys. We're here at the storage unit. I'm with the guys from Bad Cat Engineering. They came down from Maryland.
yeah.
Yeah,
This is Justin and Carl.
that's me.
You gotta be in the mic when you say things.
Oh, that's me.
Met them at DGRR. Justin had this sick FB RX-7 with a S2000 rear subframe, independent rear suspension, crazy semi-peripheral port. And I noticed under the hood that it had an REW engine with a 3D printed intake manifold and exhaust. And I was like, holy shit, dude, you got to tell me about this thing. So
3D printed everything, man. It's the future. Yeah, I truly believe that. Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're gonna like give it like a couple more years and 3D printed metal is everywhere. If you haven't already seen it, I'm sure you've probably seen some creators making some parts. Like, it is the future. It's, you know, inexpensive, affordable, and the design limitations are completely wide open. You know?
it's unbelievable. I thought this stuff was like super expensive, like maybe 5 years ago. I was seeing
Yeah.
some guys do it online.
Totally.
Couldn't believe the cost.
Yeah.
And to see it on your car and that it's possible.
Yeah.
You guys are doing this.
Yeah.
It's super awesome technology.
Yeah, I mean, compared to the price of fabricating a manifold and all the labor and time and materials that go into that, it's basically a wash. You know, it's comparable. You know, it's essentially similar priced. And then if I want 10 of them, I can order 10. You know, I make a design and then it's on my computer forever. So it's amazing.
It's also like what's nice about 3D printed stuff is you can quickly test an idea, and then instead of having to do like investment casting, it's like, okay, that didn't really work. We need to make quick changes. You can make these quick changes and get back to it testing instead of like, oh, I bought 400,000 of these and they don't work.
It sounds expensive.
It sounds very expensive. Nobody likes that one. But it's yeah, the rapid development process and just like the quick like production, it's really fantastic. And a lot of stuff we do in the shop now, we really leverage the 3D printing stuff into our designs. Excuse me, because it changes the way you think about how you build things, and that's kind of like what we kind of talked about with David. It's just like he's like, whoa, he's like, you did this, and I was like, yeah, it's like, you know, Justin designed all this stuff, you know, like I'd point out some things like maybe this is a good idea to try, and like you come up with these ideas, and then you have these real wild products that you know, we can make available for people.
Yeah, this is a FD in our shop that I've been working on for a little bit. It has a 20B that the customer was dead set on pushing it back like 10 inches. So obviously
It's way back in there.
It's way, I mean, you can see from the top here, we have one rotor sticking in front of the firewall. Everything else is under it. So
really far back.
it really creates some challenges in the pedal box, but that was something he was willing to deal with. Yep, this is my RX-8 project with a Volkswagen 07K jammed into it. Quick spool valve to block off one of the divided runners in the turbine housing. We'll see how well that works.
Whoa, and that's on the manifold side.
It's on the manifold side, yeah. So allegedly it helps the spool up pretty significantly. This is an S364 SXR on a 2.5 liter. So that just show us the position of everything and knock out a mock-up. Yeah, this is just some rough shapes that we'll put in here to just start conceptualizing some ideas. We're playing with some different cores that are available. You can see that's why it doesn't perfectly line up. We have a couple different options to choose from that we're kind of picking between. But you can see, I mean, a throttle body in here pointed down a little bit. You know, it's no problem sneaking a 3.5-inch tube through there. And if you really wanted to, and you had some bigger issues, you could squish the shape of that. You know, I've done some pretty wild shapes to get through some tight areas. You know, just because of the limitations of the space. So yeah, you can see the base plate here is just getting moved a lot closer. We'll probably make it removable and just get rid of his Wiggins clamps that he had on there. And then we'll go to a single fuel rail. We'll put both injectors side by side. The biggest thing too is the plenum volume. You know, the advantage of getting a core that's so much taller like this, like the volume of these, we'll call them the two separate plenums that you kind of have split by your intercooler. Right now, this is like 15.5 liters. So, you know, if you look at a rotary, we got like 6.6 liters.
3.3 times 2 because it's doing double the duty.
Exactly. Rotary stuff, you just kind of double it. So then you want double that for your plenum volume. So this is a little overkill even. We'll probably get closer to the ideal number when we go with the smaller core that's shown here. Yep. And then also the other thing we're going to change is ideally a water to air intercooler should not be double pass. As soon as the water goes through it, you want it to get that hot water out of there, not keep it in the intercooler for longer. So we're going to make it full cross flow and put fittings on both sides. So just another thing to correct. And, you know, I don't know, maybe we'll even get some kind of like a little intake scoop in there. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. We'll see. We're dreaming up some potential things. So.
Heck yeah. This is awesome. It's cool to just be able to see it right after you were describing it to me.
Yeah. We'll probably also do some printed heat shields in here. I think David requested titanium. Everyone loves shiny titanium that will turn cool colors when it gets hot. So that can all be printed as well, and we can have it contour to the shape, leave some air gap in there. These may end up being further away. You know, like I said, this is just kind of some rough mock-up.
All right, guys, so this is our first 3D printed test piece. This is made out of plastic, and this is our first iteration. So this is just representing 2 of the 5 rotors. Obviously, we don't need to print the whole thing because we can just slide this onto the runners that are closest to the exhaust collector and get an idea of that fitment that I was talking about in the beginning. And then you can see where the injectors are going to line up, and there's obviously going to be a few changes that were going to be made to this. This has a thicker flange than necessary. It's about a 1/2 inch thick, which is way thicker than we need it to be, but this is so we can get an idea of the fitment on and off, and we can always shrink the flange thickness so that we get more thread engagement for the bolt or the nut or the stud, whatever we ultimately end up with. So the first thing I'm going to check is clearance with studs. Now you can see we have this slotted for test fitment purposes to give us extra area, and on this manifold they're not slotted. So we'd like to be able to close at least one of these slots just for better alignment purposes. But basically you see what's going on over here. Come over here, we look, you can see that's rotor 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you can see the 2 bolt flanges. So I want to make sure that if I install a stud here and a stud here on all of these, that maybe we can pull the intake off without, you know, clashing into this manifold, the exhaust manifold, and having to remove the actual studs. So I'm going to go ahead and install the studs, and I'm just going to pick the rotors 4 and 3. So if I try to install this thing in here, when we get up to these studs, it just doesn't go because the top bolt here is getting stuck on the inside diameter of the, I don't have the clearance. See if I can focus the camera and you can see what I mean. It's like, don't have the clearance right there on that bolt to get around it. So we're smashing into the manifold. So what we're gonna have to do is we're gonna have to pull the top stud out. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pull this guy out. Let's lay the manifold on there without the stud and let's see what we got. So it should be able to slide down on the slots here without the studs on the top. So there, that's it right there. It's nice and flush. That gives you a general idea. Let me put the light underneath the manifold so you can see, and then I'll try to thread some bolts into the top here. So as I was saying earlier, we made this flange a lot thicker than it needs to be at about 1/2 inch. And so we could stand to shrink this down to probably 3/8 of an inch, or even less if we needed to, which is 9.5 millimeters or so. So in doing that, you're gonna end up with more thread engagement. So like, let's say that you were using a nut or a bolt. The bolt can only poke into the block only so much, but if you were to shorten this thickness down to 3/8 of an inch, you would get a lot more thread engagement. The other thing too is you can determine whether you want to take that away from this side of the actual flange itself or the inside of the flange. If you remove material from the inside of the flange, you're going to get more thread engagement, but you're actually also going to get more clearance to try to slide a bolt in here from the top if you were actually trying to gain, more clearance on this inner radius. So what we're going to do is a few things. We're going to shrink the thickness of this down to 3/8 of an inch. We're actually going to add more clearance on the inside of this runner here where the radius is. And then we're going to add a little bit more to this bump on the bottom so that we don't have to worry about getting the tools in there, and we can run a wider Nordlock washer, a special version of a Nordlock washer called the P version, so that we get more surface area to counteract the fact that we have an open split here. And then because we've opened up the radius on the inside here, we should be able to close this hole and have no problem. So when you combine all those aspects, we should be able to slide this thing on and off even with the two pieces already assembled and use studs on the top and the bottom. Now, the cool thing about having the injectors placed at this angle, and I don't fault Justin for this because this is the actual optimal design. You're pointing the injector spray pattern directly at the port itself. It's the quickest path to get to the port. So this is going to give you the best transient throttle response and the least amount of fuel like hitting the wall itself. So this is the optimal design for performance. However, the problem here is that it scares me because we have the fuel rail hanging out over the exhaust collector, which is in this area. So I would like to slide these injectors up and place them higher up on the runner. And then that's going to keep the fuel rail away from the heat, and it's going to be safer. The heat rises, there's less heat soak, and you're just not hanging this big rail out here over top of the collector itself. So we're going to try to slide these up and put them at the top of the runner itself. You can see that that's almost the case on the secondary stage on the original design. Now, the reason that you have two different placements for the injectors, the secondary and the primary, is, this is kind of splitting hairs. I don't think you're going to notice it very much on an engine like this, a P port that is a turbo engine. But generally speaking, like the runner, the injector that's closer to the port is going to have the best transient throttle response. That means like when you snap the throttle open really quickly. And then you're going to get the best performance from atomization of the spray being like upstream as far as possible by having your secondary stage that's delivering the most volume of fuel furthest away from the port. So you're kind of trying to combine those two aspects by having a primary stage down here and a secondary stage at the top. But as you can see here, this runner design it ends up that whether you slide them up to the top or you have them right where they are, they're still ultimately closer to the port than even like this design here, the secondaries on this design. So I don't think it's going to be much of an issue. I mean, you're dealing with just like a few inches here. And when you consider that this runner overall length is much shorter, it's 3.5 to 4 inches shorter than this runner, even if you put the injectors up here, I don't think it's going to hinder your transient throttle response. I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. So I'm kind of like not caring so much about the atomization of having a secondary stage far away in favor of putting the stages right next to each other. Now, I know people are going to say, well, you're trying to feed 10 injectors with one rail. Aren't you going to end up with pressure drop at the end of the system? Yes, that is a possibility, that if you're trying to feed all of the injectors through one rail on this really long engine, that, you know, if you're feeding the fuel in from rotor number 1, maybe rotor number 5 is going to end up with less fuel than rotor number 1. But the way around this is you increase the cross-sectional area of the rail itself. So the rail is going to have a larger diameter that's going to offset the fact that there would have been any pressure drop inherent to the rail being one piece if it was the original size that you would have each independent rail on this setup. So on this setup, we had -10 rail on the top and the bottom being fed with a -10 line on each in a series. I didn't really see a correlation between EGT and fuel flow bias. We could clearly see that the EGT bias was in the airflow through the CFD analysis. And so I don't think that there was any issue with fuel flow bias or pressure drop because we had really large -10 rails and a mechanical fuel pump operating at an extremely high base pressure, which is, you know, possible with a mechanical pump. They're designed for that. So in this situation, we're going to go up to probably a -12 rail. So we have way more than enough cross-sectional area inside the rail to prevent pressure drop from one side to the other. And I don't think we're going to have any issues whatsoever. And then we're going to add a fuel pulsation damper from radium to the rail at the end of the rail before it returns back to the regulator, so that any sort of pulsation that's occurring from the injectors being side by side with two stages doesn't cause any sort of interference or pulsation in the fuel flow as it goes across the rail. So we're going to print a new piece, and it's just going to be a single piece only. We don't need multiple rotors, just one piece to be able to double check and verify that these changes give what we're looking for. And then from there, we'll slide the injectors up, and then we're going to print it all as 5 rotors at one time for one final fitment before we go and order the actual 3D metal pieces. So we've got our new test piece here. Can't wait to slide it on the engine and see if it fits properly on and off with the studs. Gonna have to wait till the next video to see that. And we're also gonna go over details on the runner design, how we achieved this length. I'm gonna show you the Mazda SAE factory race engine papers from the 1990s where they did experiments on the lengths and taper. And that's something that's really cool. You can't do a taper on hand fabricated stuff like this easily, but on this 3D printed design, we're able to actually grow the size of the diameter as we move from the port to the plenum. So we'll talk about the benefits of doing a taper and how we implemented that, all the design process behind how the sound waves work to help increase the horsepower, and why the 787B had a trumpeting adjustable length intake manifold that adjusted the lengths of the ITB as they go to higher RPM to maximize the torque and the power band. And it's just going to be really exciting. I can't wait to show you guys also the final rendering that's absolutely beautiful of the engine bay with the red intake manifold, all of the lettering that Justin did, the final rendering before we pull the trigger. If you like rotary content, please consider subscribing to my channel. I just want to take you guys along for the ride, and I want you to experience what I'm experiencing, because this is all about having fun, and it's all about the science and the process. Thanks again, guys. David Zachary, Mazzei Formula. Hope you guys have a great week.